Today's story is about three mysterious disappearances that have baffled investigators and haunted the public. A little girl vanishes from her family vacation in Portugal. A college student goes missing after a car crash in New Hampshire, and a mother disappears amid a bitter divorce in Connecticut. Each case is filled with twists, unanswered questions, and chilling details that will keep you on the edge of your seat. But before we get into these stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, you've come to the right place. That's all we do, and we upload daily. So if that's your thing, make sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss a new video. Alright, let's get into today's story. It was a warm evening on May 3rd, 2007, at the Praia da Luz resort in Portugal's Algarve region. The night air was filled with the soft hum of tourists enjoying their dinners and the faint sound of waves rolling onto the beach nearby. For the McCann family, Gary, Kate, and their three young children, this was a typical evening of what had been a relaxed vacation. Staying in apartment 5EA, the family had settled into a comforting routine. Madeline, their lively 3-year-old daughter, had spent the day playing by the pool with her siblings, 2-year-old twins, Sean and Amelie. By evening, all three children had been bathed, fed, and tucked into bed, leaving their parents a chance to unwind with friends. In the apartment, the children's bedroom was set up with care. Madeline slept peacefully between her two younger siblings, a soft pink blanket drawn over her small figure. Her favorite stuffed animal lay by her side, a comforting presence in an unfamiliar setting. Just outside the room, a window with curtains overlooked the street below, and near it, the sliding glass doors opened to the back patio, allowing a soft breeze to enter the quiet apartment. That night, Jerry and Kate joined a group of friends for dinner at the resort's tapas restaurant, just a short walk away from their apartment. The plan was simple. Every half hour, one of the adults would walk back to the apartment to check on the sleeping children. The arrangement felt secure, and the group settled into their meal, conversations drifting easily between the familiar and the mundane. As the evening continued, Jerry got up from the table around 9:05 p.m. to make the first check. Walking across the quiet courtyard, he reached the apartment and unlocked the front door, slipping inside to avoid disturbing the children. The apartment was silent. He looked into the bedroom and found all three children in bed as he'd left them, undisturbed. Satisfied, he returned to the restaurant, unaware that within the hour their lives would be altered in ways he could never have imagined. At 9:30, another friend, Jane Tanner, offered to check on her own children in a nearby apartment. As she passed by the McCann's apartment, she noticed a man walking along the quiet road, carrying a young child dressed in pajamas. The figure seemed ordinary in the dim light, and Jane continued on her way without giving it much thought. She had no idea that this fleeting moment would later become one of the most scrutinized details in the entire investigation. Back at the table, Kate decided it was her turn to check on the children. It was now 10 p.m. As she walked toward the apartment, she felt a sense of ease, never suspecting the nightmare waiting for her. She unlocked the door, stepping into the familiar quiet. But when she reached the children's room, her heart skipped a beat. Madeline's bed was empty. At first, she thought Madeline might have wandered into another room, or be hiding as part of a game. But as she looked around, the chilling realization set in: Madeline was gone. In a state of shock, Kate frantically searched the apartment, checking the closets, under the beds, even behind the curtains, as if she might somehow find her daughter hidden in the shadows. Unable to keep the fear inside, Kate rushed back to the restaurant, her voice ringing out through the quiet night. She yelled, "They've taken her!" startling everyone around her. The group at the table froze, struggling to process her words. Gary bolted from his seat, racing back to the apartment, his mind whirling with disbelief and dread. He retraced Kate's steps, scouring every corner of the apartment, but there was no sign of Madeline. News of Madeline's disappearance spread quickly through the resort, reaching both staff and guests. Panic filled the air as people began to search the complex and surrounding area. Flashlights cut through the darkness as guests and staff formed search parties, calling out Madeline's name, combing every corner of the resort grounds. Security personnel at the resort searched rooms, hallways, and any other possible hiding place, hoping Madeline had simply wandered off and would soon be found. As minutes turned into hours, it became painfully clear that this was more than a simple case of a child gone astray. The local police, known as the ENR, arrived at the scene around midnight. The officers took statements from Kate, Gary, and their friends, but with limited resources and no immediate leads, their search options were limited. As dawn approached, the search continued, but there was still no trace of Madeleine. The resort, once a peaceful vacation spot, was now engulfed in a tense and frantic atmosphere. The McCann's room was sealed off, and police began questioning nearby residents, combing through every detail. For the McCanns, the hope of finding Madeleine safe grew dimmer by the minute. As the days passed, the search expanded, with Portuguese authorities conducting an exhaustive sweep of the local terrain and beaches, while police searched the surrounding towns and countryside, placing Madeleine's photo in every possible location. News of Madeleine McCann's disappearance quickly made headlines worldwide, sparking an unprecedented outpouring of support. Tourists, locals, and authorities alike were drawn into the search as people from all walks of life offered to help. Despite the attention and resources now focused on the case, no solid leads surfaced. Every potential sighting led to a dead end. Every clue proved inconclusive. The days after her disappearance saw a shift from the initial shock and confusion to a more complex investigation. Police interviewed staff and guests, sifting through statements and timelines in an attempt to recreate the events of that night. Authorities gathered evidence, hoping that some overlooked detail would reveal the truth. But as the investigation dragged on, so did the lingering mystery. What had happened to Madeleine McCann? As the hours turned into days, the investigation into Madeleine McCann's disappearance intensified. Local police from the Portuguese Guarda Nacional Republicana, GNR, were soon joined by detectives from the Polícia Judiciária, PJ, Portugal's main criminal investigation unit. With the world's eyes now on Praia da Luz, the police faced immense pressure to deliver answers quickly. The quiet coastal village had transformed overnight into a focal point of global media attention, with news vans and reporters crowding its narrow streets, all eager to uncover the truth behind Madeleine's vanishing. The apartment where the McCanns had stayed was swiftly designated a crime scene. Officers secured the perimeter, treating it as the last known location of Madeleine. Every inch of the small space was meticulously combed for potential evidence, from fingerprints to fibers. However, the apartment had already been disturbed by the initial search efforts and visits from family, friends, and hotel staff, making it challenging to establish a clear forensic trail. Investigators were left to piece together the sequence of events with limited evidence, a reality that frustrated both the authorities and the McCann family. As investigators interviewed Kate and Jerry, they focused on the layout of the apartment, the routine the group had followed that night, and the possibility that someone may have been watching the family in the days leading up to the incident. Each new conversation revealed further complications in what initially seemed a straightforward case of a child wandering off or being quickly found. The McCanns explained the window in the children's bedroom had been left closed, though not locked, to allow fresh air. And while the apartment's doors were secure, the patio doors used by the adults for their frequent checks provided a potential entry point. A more troubling theory emerged as police considered the possibility that Madeleine had been taken deliberately. Although the town was a family-friendly resort area, police could not ignore the rising suspicions that her disappearance might be linked to someone who had observed the McCanns' routine. Rumors circulated as locals and tourists alike speculated on strangers seen near the resort, and the notion that someone might have seized the opportunity created by the parents' routine absence. In those initial days, officers began to feel the strain of an investigation mired in uncertainties. To assist, the British police and Interpol offered support, with teams skilled in child abduction cases arriving to provide expertise. This collaboration seemed promising, yet the linguistic and procedural differences between the agencies posed additional challenges. As PJ detectives and British authorities analyzed the evidence, the press and public awaited updates, desperate for a breakthrough. The search efforts continued relentlessly, with officers and volunteers scouring nearby fields, roads, and beaches. Special teams were brought in to examine the apartment with advanced forensic tools, using everything from UV lights to sniffing dogs trained to detect human traces. Despite these efforts, tangible clues remained elusive. Meanwhile, the investigation broadened its scope as authorities sought out every potential witness and scrutinized each person present at the resort on the night of Madeleine's disappearance. A turning point arrived when one witness reported seeing a suspicious figure near the McCanns' apartment. The sighting, vague and inconclusive, involved a man carrying a child in pajamas away from the area around the time Madeleine disappeared. The witness's description, though not entirely clear in detail, ignited a flurry of public speculation and investigative theories. This potential sighting of a person of interest spurred the search into overdrive, as police released composite sketches based on witness recollections. But even as these images circulated, promising leads failed to develop, leaving the case hanging on a thread of uncertain evidence. The McCanns, faced with the trauma of their daughter's disappearance, made a public appeal, imploring anyone with information to come forward. Their sorrowful expressions and heartfelt pleas resonated worldwide, but the case took on a new level of complexity as their statements and actions came under intense scrutiny. As the investigation progressed, media speculation began to shift. Reporters questioned every aspect of the McCanns' account, from their dinner routine that evening to their handling of the tragedy. Despite the mounting attention, the Policia Judiciaria remained focused on a clear goal: gathering enough concrete evidence to identify suspects or establish a likely sequence of events. The team examined witness reports, reconstructing the timeline to pinpoint where potential opportunities for an intruder may have arisen. Hours of statements and data were meticulously recorded and cross-checked, yet each day that passed without answers seemed to heighten the tension and pressure for results. As the weeks unfolded, Praia da Luz bore witness to an evolving and turbulent investigation, with police, the McCann family, and the public all hoping for a breakthrough that would explain the tragic events of that night. As time wore on, suspicions in the Madeleine McCann case began to shift focus, and a complex web of theories and potential suspects began to unfold. The once simple idea a child wandering off had long faded, replaced by an array of possibilities, each more intricate and disturbing than the last. Investigators began to scrutinize everyone who had been present at the resort, searching for anyone who might have noticed the family's routine or displayed unusual behavior. Among these suspects, some individuals stood out, and their stories quickly became focal points in the growing investigation. The man who had been seen carrying a child near the McCann's apartment at around 10 p.m. on the night Madeleine disappeared was one such figure. The sighting provided by Jane Tanner, a friend of the McCanns, described a dark-haired man holding a child dressed in pajamas, heading away from the vicinity of apartment 5E. Although Jane's recollection was limited by the dim light and the fleeting nature of the moment, her statement added a troubling layer to the investigation. Detectives worked to identify and locate this man, but he seemed to have vanished without a trace, leaving behind only vague descriptions and unconfirmed possibilities. At the same time, the investigation began turning inward, examining the people closest to Madeleine. The intensity of the scrutiny was unprecedented, and soon it was not just the police asking questions. The media also turned their gaze toward the McCanns themselves. Reporters speculated on every aspect of Kate and Jerry's actions that night, from the dinner arrangement with friends to their methods of checking on the children. At first, these were subtle inquiries, but over time, a troubling narrative emerged, questioning the parents' potential involvement in the case. The shift in focus was not unique to the media. Within the police ranks, theories began to develop that Madeleine's disappearance might not have been an outside act, but something closer to home. The notion that Kate and Jerry might have somehow been connected to the events was difficult for many to comprehend, yet it became an avenue of investigation. Detectives examined the McCanns' backgrounds, their interactions with others at the resort, and the details of the statements they had given. The very same heartbreaking pleas that had drawn public empathy now came under scrutiny, as analysts dissected their words and expressions, searching for any indication of hidden knowledge. To support this theory, the police brought in forensic experts to examine the McCanns' apartment, focusing on the possibility that a tragic incident might have occurred inside. Specially trained sniffer dogs were employed to detect any unusual evidence in the apartment and the McCanns' rental car. These canine units were trained to identify traces of certain elements that, though faint, could suggest that something had happened in the space where Madeleine was last seen. Their findings, though far from conclusive, added fuel to the already blazing media firestorm. Meanwhile, Kate and Jerry McCann found themselves at the center of a relentless public examination. While they maintained their innocence and continued to plead for Madeleine's safe return, the pressure surrounding them grew to unimaginable levels. Friends, family, and supporters stood by the McCanns, affirming their belief in the couple's account of events. However, Others pointed to inconsistencies in timelines and statements, suggesting that there was more to the story than initially presented. The mounting stress of these accusations took a visible toll on the McCanns, who continued to face an unyielding torrent of scrutiny. As these theories played out, the police also pursued leads from other witnesses and locals who had reported seeing strangers around Praia da Luz before Madeleine disappeared. Among them were accounts of a man loitering near the McCann's apartment in the days leading up to the night in question. Witnesses described a figure with an unkempt appearance who seemed out of place in the resort's relaxed and family-oriented environment. Investigators dug into these sightings, conducting interviews and compiling descriptions, but this individual remained elusive. The investigation into these potential suspects brought to light several other theories. One involved the possibility of a network targeting children, a deeply unsettling prospect that cast a shadow over the town and fueled the growing fears among both locals and tourists. With limited resources and growing tension between Portuguese and British authorities, these leads were challenging to verify. As each new tip arrived, officers worked tirelessly to pursue it, hoping that a breakthrough would finally come. In the midst of this, Kate and Jerry found themselves not only defending their innocence, but also facing the sorrow of a world that now seemed to view them with suspicion. Despite the hurtful allegations, they held press conferences, released statements, and maintained hope that Madeleine was still alive, somewhere beyond the reach of the turmoil surrounding them. The ever-widening circle of suspects, rumors, and conflicting theories complicated an already challenging investigation, pulling the case in multiple directions and delaying any clear resolution. Yet, despite the haze of accusations, questions, and shattered lives, the search for the truth persisted. As Madeleine's disappearance gripped global headlines, her case triggered one of the most extensive search and awareness campaigns in history. The McCanns, despite the intense scrutiny surrounding them, dedicated themselves to raising awareness, calling on the public for any information that could lead to their daughter's safe return. They launched an international search effort, funded largely by donations from supporters who sympathized with their plight and believed in the possibility of Madeleine's survival. This wave of support crossed borders and spread from Europe to the Americas, Asia, and beyond, as people worldwide kept Madeleine's image close, hoping for her safe recovery. High-profile donors, including well-known public figures, lent their support, and Madeleine's face became a symbol of resilience and hope. Posters, billboards, and advertisements displaying her photograph and details appeared in cities across the world. In airports, cafes, shopping centers, and online platforms, her face served as a reminder of the little girl who had vanished without a trace. The McCanns even set up a website to manage tips, track developments, and keep the public engaged in the ongoing search for their daughter. In addition to physical and digital campaigns, the McCanns took part in numerous interviews and public appeals. They traveled extensively, meeting with government officials, child protection organizations, and law enforcement agencies in various countries, urging authorities and civilians alike to stay vigilant. Kate and Jerry hoped that these efforts would bring attention to Madeleine's case and encourage anyone with even the smallest piece of information to come forward. Their belief in her possible recovery became the driving force behind their actions, and they used every platform available to amplify her story. Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies around the world offered their assistance, and Interpol issued a global missing person alert for Madeleine. In Portugal, local police continue to work with British authorities to analyze the findings from the initial search and interviews, though the collaboration faced setbacks due to differing investigative approaches. British investigators brought with them specific expertise in cases involving missing children, and their insights provided additional avenues for exploration. Yet the limitations of forensic evidence, combined with the chaotic early hours after her disappearance, made it difficult for authorities to produce conclusive findings. The McCanns' continued outreach efforts led to a stream of reported sightings of Madeleine in various countries. Each new report brought a fresh wave of hope and activity as teams of investigators worked to track and verify these potential leads. From Morocco to Spain, from Malta to Northern Europe, witnesses claimed to have seen a child matching Madeleine's description. Some of these reports seemed credible, and for a time, detectives in each region coordinated with local police to follow up on the sightings. But time after time, these hopeful signs turned out to be dead ends, and each unsuccessful lead only added to the anguish of the search. As the investigation expanded internationally, specialists with experience in tracking missing persons were called in to assess potential scenarios. Some experts suggested Madeleine could have been taken to another country, possibly as part of an organized group. This theory, although difficult to verify, prompted local authorities and investigators to enhance their search efforts. Yet, even as the search widened and new countries were included in the investigation, tangible clues remained scarce, and the possibility of Madeleine being found felt both urgent and increasingly distant. Back in Portugal, the strain on the Praia da Luz community was palpable. The town, once known for its tranquility, had become synonymous with the mystery and heartbreak surrounding Madeleine's disappearance. Local residents, who initially joined the search efforts enthusiastically, began to feel the weight of the investigation as it brought a constant flow of media attention and visitors. Tourists hesitated to visit, and businesses in the area struggled as the peaceful reputation of Praia da Luz was overshadowed by a lingering sense of fear and uncertainty. For the McCanns, the emotional toll of the ongoing investigation grew heavier with each passing day. Despite the unfounded allegations against them, they continued to focus on finding their daughter. Kate and Jerry kept a detailed record of all developments, conversations, and investigative steps, hoping that persistence and thoroughness might eventually reveal something overlooked in the flurry of the early investigation. They held on to the belief that someone, somewhere, might have information that could lead to Madeleine's safe return, and they refused to let that hope fade, no matter the odds stacked against them. As new investigative teams joined the search for answers continued, intensifying the collective determination to solve the mystery surrounding Madeleine's disappearance. As the years passed, the mysteries surrounding Madeleine McCann's disappearance remained as troubling as ever. Despite exhaustive efforts, every lead seemed to fall short, leaving the case open and unresolved. But with each passing year, the search for Madeleine was not abandoned. Fresh teams of investigators, driven by a sense of duty and the desire to bring answers to the McCann family, revisited the evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and re-examined potential suspects. In 2011, the British government took a renewed interest in the case, launching a review led by Scotland Yard, known as Operation Grange. This task force was composed of seasoned investigators, many with experience in solving high-profile cases. Their mission was clear: review all available information with fresh eyes, hoping that advancements in investigative techniques and forensic science might bring new insights. The task was daunting. The investigators faced years of accumulated data, reports, and witness statements, each one representing a piece of the puzzle that had yet to come together. Operation Grange combed through every detail, including past sightings, early suspects, and statements given by those at the resort. The team also enlisted forensic experts to retest samples collected from the McCann's apartment, taking advantage of updated methods that could detect even the smallest traces of DNA or environmental clues. Although initial findings yielded no breakthroughs, the investigators remained optimistic that each re-examination brought them closer to understanding what might have happened on that fateful night in 2007. As the task force proceeded, they uncovered previously overlooked details and contradictions in statements given by individuals who had been in Praia da Luz at the time. Theories were revisited, including the possibility that Madeleine had been taken by an individual or group with prior knowledge of the resort's layout and routines. Scotland Yard's detectives also explored the possibility that Madeleine's disappearance could be linked to a series of suspicious incidents that had occurred in the region prior to her vanishing. These incidents, involving attempts to enter vacation apartments and reports of strangers acting suspiciously, suggested a potential pattern that investigators found hard to ignore. Meanwhile, technology and social media began playing a significant role in the ongoing search. Online forums, social media groups, and international support communities allowed people worldwide to share their thoughts, theories, and sightings. Some members of the public took to investigative efforts themselves, poring over publicly available details in hopes of uncovering something that the official investigation might have missed. This global involvement was a double-edged sword for the McCann family. While they were grateful for the support, they were also painfully aware that not every theory brought by the public would lead to something meaningful. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence, Operation Grange's investigators made several public statements, assuring the McCanns and the public that the case remained open and that new information continued to emerge. In 2013, After nearly 2 years of careful analysis, Scotland Yard announced they were treating the case as a criminal investigation, reclassifying it from a simple review to an active pursuit of suspects. This shift reignited public interest, as many saw it as a sign that the case might be on the verge of a breakthrough. One of the critical aspects of this renewed investigation involved pursuing a number of potential suspects who had been in the area at the time. Among these individuals were people with known criminal histories or connections to illicit activity. Scotland Yard's approach was systematic. Each lead was followed until it could be fully verified or ruled out, an effort that brought forward new pieces of information, though no definitive answer. The years passed with both hopeful moments and painful setbacks. New leads were shared, only to fade after further investigation. Public interest in Madeleine's case would occasionally resurge, especially during anniversaries or when a new sighting was reported. But the family knew that each day without news brought a bittersweet blend of hope and heartbreak. For Kate and Jerry, the weight of the investigation remained constant. Their hope for Madeleine's return was as strong as ever, yet they had come to accept the realities of their long and exhausting search. The support they received from friends, family, and the global community helped them press on, despite the toll it had taken on their lives. They continued to believe that somewhere, somehow, an answer to their daughter's disappearance might still emerge. In recent years, advancements in international collaboration and investigative technology have added another dimension to the ongoing case. While it remains unresolved, the hope of finding Madeleine has not faded entirely. Detectives, family members, and supporters around the world still hold on to the belief that, one day, the truth of what happened to Madeleine McCann will come to light. The next story is called Maura Murray. It was a bitterly cold evening in February 2004 when 21-year-old Maura Murray's life took a mysterious and unsettling turn. There were no hints earlier in the day that anything unusual was coming. She was a bright nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, known for her athletic ability, intelligence, and quiet nature. But on that night, Maura's life would take a path that left her family and investigators searching for answers that may still lie somewhere along a dark road in New Hampshire. The day had started like any other. Maura had attended class and spent time at her job on campus. But by the afternoon, something shifted. She made a series of calls to rental properties in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, a region she was familiar with and had visited before. She sent an email to her professors and work supervisors, explaining that she would be taking a week off due to a family emergency. Oddly, her family later confirmed that there was no such emergency. It was a move that raised questions, but left no answers. Maura packed her belongings, her textbooks, toiletries, and a week's worth of clothing. She also gathered a few personal items, and her favorite childhood stuffed animal. Then, she printed directions to Bartlett, New Hampshire. Just past 4:30 p.m., she hit the road in her black 1996 Saturn sedan, heading north toward the mountains. It was a 3-hour drive, and Maura seemed prepared for it. But what exactly she intended to do once she got there remains a mystery. As Maura drove north that evening, the sky began to darken, and the temperature dropped even lower. The roads were slick with ice, a dangerous challenge for any driver, especially one traveling on a winding rural highway like Route 112. Her route was isolated, leading through small, scattered towns and long stretches of forest. Yet, for reasons no one could explain, she pressed on, passing through the New Hampshire towns, each one bringing her closer to the wilderness. Around 7:30 p.m., Maura's journey took a sudden and unexpected turn. She lost control of her car on a sharp curve near the small town of Haverhill, New Hampshire. The Saturn careened off the road, colliding with a snowbank. The impact was not severe enough to cause injury, but the front end of her car was damaged and it became stuck in the snow. The accident site was on a quiet stretch of road surrounded by dense woods, a place where visibility was limited and the silence was almost unnerving. Soon after the crash, a nearby resident, Butch Atwood, a school bus driver returning from his evening shift, noticed the stranded vehicle and pulled over to offer help. Butch was familiar with the area and knew that a young woman alone on such an isolated road could be vulnerable. He approached Maura's car, intending to assist her, but her response left him puzzled. Maura was visibly shaken but didn't seem physically hurt. When Butch offered to call for help, she declined, saying that she had already called AA. However, there was no cell phone service in that part of Haverhill, and it would have been impossible for Maura to make such a call. Butch respected her wishes and left, although he couldn't shake the strange feeling about their encounter. Before he departed, he glanced back in his rearview mirror, catching one last glimpse of Maura as she stood beside her car in the dim evening light, her figure fading against the snowy backdrop. Roughly 7 minutes later, a passing motorist dialed 911 to report the accident. The caller mentioned seeing a car off the road with a young woman beside it, appearing unharmed but alone. A police officer was dispatched to the scene, and despite the rural location, he arrived within minutes. But when the officer pulled up to the site, Maura was gone. Her car remained on the side of the road, partially obstructing the lane, but there was no sign of her. The scene left more questions than answers. Maura's car was locked, and her belongings were scattered inside. Her wallet and ID were missing, along with her keys, which indicated she may have left with the intention of returning. Her scent was tracked by search dogs, leading down the road for about 100 yards. Then, abruptly, the trail stopped, as if she had vanished into thin air. The officers searched the area, peering into the woods, but the night was dark and temperatures were frigid. If Maura had ventured into the surrounding forest, the biting cold and thick underbrush would make it a challenging journey. No footprints were visible in the snow, and with each passing minute, the search grew more desperate. Calls went out to local authorities, and by the next day, a full-scale investigation was underway. The days following Maura Murray's disappearance were filled with mounting urgency, questions, and confusion. When Maura's family learned of her accident and disappearance, they quickly made the journey to New Hampshire, hoping to join the search and bring Maura home safely. As they arrived, they found themselves facing a confounding situation. A small town puzzled by her disappearance, a tight-knit community unsettled by the sudden mystery, and investigators struggling to make sense of the elusive evidence. The local police, state authorities, and even volunteer search teams came together, combing through the woods, abandoned structures, and roadsides in the surrounding area. Authorities retraced Maura's last known steps along the dark and icy Route 112. They began by examining her car, hoping it would hold clues that could point them in the right direction. Inside the vehicle, her belongings lay scattered, her packed bags, textbooks, and personal items. An empty bottle of wine was found on the floor, and there were visible stains on the car seats, suggesting that she may have had a drink before or during her journey. To the investigators, these details raised additional questions. Had Maura been planning a getaway, or simply seeking an escape from something that troubled her? Maura's family, especially her father Fred Murray, was relentless in pushing for more thorough searches and demanding answers from local authority. Fred was vocal and frustrated, insisting that his daughter wouldn't have just left her life behind. He requested more resources, aerial searches, and dive teams to comb nearby bodies of water. His determination was driven by a sense of urgency, an intuition that something was wrong, something that could only be solved by getting as many people as possible involved in finding his daughter. But even with growing public attention and Fred's unyielding appeals, the investigation seemed to hit dead ends at every turn. Investigators looked carefully into Maura's personal life for clues about her mindset leading up to her departure. They found that, in the days prior, Maura had seemed anxious, possibly even distressed. She had encountered personal challenges that left her feeling unsettled. A recent incident at her university job, stress from academic responsibilities, and struggles in her personal relationships. Friends and family provided insight, describing her as a driven young woman who, despite facing challenges, was never one to give up or walk away without warning. As the search continued, authorities began analyzing a more complex possibility. Could Maura have chosen to disappear voluntarily, leaving her old life behind? This theory began to circulate within the investigation. In fact, the printed directions to New Hampshire that she'd brought with her suggested she may have had a destination in mind, a specific spot that may have held significance to her. But her family and friends argued against this idea, stating that Maura was not the kind of person who would cut ties with everyone she loved without a word. This debate between voluntary disappearance and potential foul play left investigators split, as they considered both scenarios with equal weight. After days of combing the area near the crash site, investigators expanded their search radius, deploying scent-tracking dogs to help narrow down Maura's possible movements. The search dogs followed her scent from the car, trailing it along the road for about 100 yards before it stopped. This sudden end led some to suspect that Maura may have been picked up by a passing car. The idea of a pickup point suggested that someone, either a friend or a stranger, may have given her a ride. But without concrete evidence, this theory remained speculative. As days turned into weeks, the leads grew thinner, and tension within the investigation rose. Local residents grew wary, unsettled by the idea that a young woman could vanish so quickly and completely in their quiet town. Volunteers, friends, and family covered miles of rough terrain, snow-covered woods, and frozen rivers. They looked for any sign that could lead them to her, but the harsh winter conditions and unforgiving landscape made the search nearly impossible. The sense of urgency was palpable, but the trail remained cold, leaving those who knew and loved Maura grappling with a void where answers should have been. Amid the uncertainty, rumors began to swirl in the small town. Some speculated that Maura might have planned this as a way to escape from personal problems or pressures. Others wondered if someone else had played a role in her disappearance, someone who may have crossed paths with her on that lonely stretch of road. But as her family continued to assert, none of these explanations felt right. They were certain that Maura wouldn't have left without reaching out to them if she were in trouble. Still, the days passed, and hope became harder to sustain. Maura's family felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness as winter melted into spring, with no new clues and no breakthroughs in the investigation. As time moved forward, Maura Murray's disappearance seemed to gain a life of its own, evolving into one of the most perplexing mysteries of its kind. Maura's case soon became a hot topic among armchair detectives, crime enthusiasts, and the media alike. Speculation was rampant, and the theories surrounding her last known moments became increasingly complex, fueled by the strange and haunting clues that seemed to offer just enough detail to keep everyone guessing. One of the most discussed pieces of evidence was the eerie trail left behind by Maura's car and its contents. Her Saturn had been a reliable vehicle, yet something about the way it skidded off the road on that snowy night raised questions. The impact had left the car damaged, but not beyond repair, and its placement by the side of the road seemed strange, almost as if it had been abandoned intentionally. Inside, the scene felt disorganized but also oddly calculated. Items such as Maura's schoolbooks, personal belongings, and even a few empty containers were found inside, scattered across the seats. Her wallet and credit cards were missing, suggesting that she had them with her when she left the car. These details, while seemingly small, became crucial in piecing together what might have happened. In the days after the accident, investigators began to consider the possibility that Maura's disappearance was tied to something more sinister. They examined whether she might have encountered a stranger on Route 112, perhaps someone who took advantage of her vulnerable situation. Yet, as much as investigators and family members wanted to pursue this lead, there was little in the way of concrete evidence to support it. Surveillance footage from nearby gas stations and shops showed no sign of her, and no witnesses came forward to report seeing Maura with anyone suspicious. The case grew colder, as it seemed Maura had simply vanished without a trace, leaving nothing behind but an empty car and unanswered questions. To make matters more confounding, a few unsettling theories began to gain traction. The idea that Maura might have wanted to disappear deliberately became a prominent discussion point among those following the case. As investigators delved into Maura's life, they found hints of recent stressors, a traffic accident a few days earlier, tensions in her personal relationships, and rumors of academic pressures. Some even speculated that Maura may have staged her disappearance as a way to leave her old life behind, though her family fiercely rejected this notion. To them, Maura was a dedicated, loving individual who would never willingly sever ties with her family without a reason. Yet, the theory lingered, casting a shadow over the investigation and pulling it in a direction that, for her family, felt like a disservice to who Maura truly was. But the questions didn't end there. A few days after the accident, a rag was discovered stuffed into the tailpipe of Maura's Saturn, an unusual and potentially dangerous find. Investigators wondered if someone had intentionally placed it there, either to cause the car to break down or to make it seem as though it had. Maura's father speculated that it might have been her attempt to block exhaust from entering the car's cabin while she waited for help. Yet, with no clear evidence, the rag's presence remained an enigma, adding another twist to a case already full of puzzling details. As Maura's story spread, her case attracted an online following. Internet forums lit up with discussions, as amateur sleuths picked apart every available detail. Some members of the online community were convinced that Maura had fallen victim to foul play, possibly at the hands of someone she had met while on her way to New Hampshire. Others believed she had escaped into the woods, either to hide from something or to find a secluded place to think. There was even a theory that she might have left her life to start anew, perhaps joining someone who was waiting for her. Each theory seemed plausible, yet each had its own flaws, keeping the mystery alive and leaving those invested in her story feeling as though they were chasing shadows. As the investigation carried on, police also began to consider whether Maura's case could be connected to other disappearances in the region. Over the years, a handful of young women had gone missing in New England under similarly mysterious circumstances, leading some to suspect that Maura might have encountered the same person responsible for these other cases. However, no clear links were ever found, and the idea remained a disturbing possibility, though unsupported by evidence. The eerie coincidence of multiple disappearances in the area only added to the fear and uncertainty surrounding Maura's case. By now, Maura's family was feeling the weight of the case's complexity. The public's interest, while encouraging, also brought frustrations. Some well-intentioned people began to approach them with new theories or supposed sightings, each one sparking hope, only to be ruled out after careful investigation. Fred Murray became a constant presence in New Hampshire, tirelessly searching the area, handing out flyers, and speaking with anyone who might have information. He was determined not to let his daughter's story fade into obscurity, but each lead he followed seemed to circle back to the same dead ends, as though Maura's disappearance was destined to remain unsolved. As the years passed, Maura's case became something more than a mystery. It became a haunting puzzle that left those who sought answers torn between hope and frustration. Her story served as a reminder of how easily someone could disappear and how difficult it could be for loved ones to find peace without closure. The small town in New Hampshire that had witnessed her last moments on Route 112 remained frozen in time, a place marked by her absence and the silent questions that still lingered along its snowy roads. In the years that followed Maura Murray's disappearance, her family's resolve to find her only grew stronger. To Fred Murray, Maura's father, the case was deeply personal, a mystery that haunted him every day. He could not accept the idea of leaving her case in the hands of fate, convinced that answers were still out there, hidden somewhere along the remote roads and dense forests of New Hampshire. The family's search efforts intensified, with Fred at the forefront, often spending his weekends and holidays traveling to New Hampshire, where he would search tirelessly, sometimes alone, sometimes with volunteers, looking for any hint that could bring Maura home. Fred's dedication caught the attention of the media and advocacy groups for missing persons, who were moved by his relentless pursuit of the truth. He became a familiar figure in the community surrounding the area of Maura's disappearance, handing out flyers, talking to locals, and re-examining every possible lead that had been investigated by law enforcement. He visited small towns, followed rumors, and even contacted private investigators, hoping that someone, somewhere, would hold the key to unraveling the mystery. This hands-on approach made Fred a powerful advocate for his daughter's case, and his presence kept the investigation active. However, as months turned to years, tensions grew between Maura's family and law enforcement. Fred felt that not enough was being done, that resources had been limited or misdirected, and that key leads had been neglected. He pushed authorities to conduct more expansive searches, even in areas that had been previously cleared, urging them to leave no stone unturned. Fred's frustration was clear. To him, the case was far from cold. He believed there were still clues, missed details that had the potential to bring his daughter back, or at least answer the countless questions that lingered. Despite Fred's dedication, some of the family's efforts hit barriers. Requests to search certain private properties near the site of Maura's accident were sometimes denied, as local residents and property owners grew wary of the attention. Some felt uneasy about the idea of law enforcement combing through their land. Others were simply uncomfortable with the continued spotlight on the case. These refusals weighed heavily on Fred, who felt that each denied request was a missed opportunity that could be critical. He had come to believe that Maura's fate was likely tied to that stretch of Route 112, and his insistence on reinvestigating the area only deepened as time went on. The continued search and mounting frustration also took a toll on Maura's family emotionally. The endless cycle of hope and disappointment, leads and dead ends, was an exhausting process. Her mother, siblings, and close friends tried to support Fred in his quest for answers, but they also faced the painful reality of not knowing if their loved one was alive or lost forever. Each anniversary of Maura's disappearance brought back fresh waves of sorrow and uncertainty. For them, it wasn't just about uncovering what had happened. It was about finding closure, something they could hold on to, even if the answers proved to be painful. Meanwhile, public interest in Maura's case continued to grow. A number of online forums, blogs, and discussion groups kept her story alive, with people from all walks of life sharing their theories, analyzing timelines, and reviewing known evidence. Some amateur sleuths focused on re-examining the details of the crash, while others tried to trace Maura's last known communications. The case became a community effort, with online supporters who never knew Maura feeling drawn to her story, treating the search for answers as if she were one of their own. While this attention was largely positive, it did have its downsides. The case attracted certain individuals who, despite their good intentions, inadvertently created more confusion by spreading unverified theories or contacting the family with speculative claims. False leads and dubious sightings were reported, and as much as the family appreciated the public's support, these unsubstantiated tips often led to heartache. Each unproven theory weighed heavily, adding another layer to the maze of unknowns. Over time, Maura's case came to symbolize the struggle that many families of missing persons endure. Advocacy groups reached out to support the Murrays, bringing attention to the often limited resources available for families trying to find loved ones. Maura's story sparked broader discussions on missing persons cases across the country, highlighting the challenges and emotional toll that families face when answers remain elusive. For Maura's family, every day without her was a reminder of what they had lost. They had held onto hope for so long, believing that one day a breakthrough would come, that a missing piece would emerge and finally explain what had happened on that cold night in February. But even as the years passed, that hope remained, burning quietly beneath the surface, keeping them going through the darkest days. As they continued their search, Maura's family became even more determined to find some form of closure, refusing to let the case be forgotten. As the years turned into a decade, Maura Murray's case remained one of the most unsettling unsolved mysteries in America. The search efforts had grown quieter, but never fully ceased. Her family continued to push for answers, and her case became a haunting reminder of how easily someone could vanish without explanation. Yet, despite the passage of time, Maura's story maintained a strange and gripping hold on both investigators and the public. People were still drawn to her story, and the media continued to cover it periodically, especially on anniversaries of her disappearance. But with each retelling, the gaps in her story only seemed to grow wider, leaving room for more questions and speculation. To keep her case from fading into obscurity, Maura's family worked closely with advocates for missing persons, determined to bring her story to a wider audience. In recent years, advancements in technology and investigative techniques led to renewed hope that perhaps her case could benefit from modern forensic methods. New cold case detectives took interest, reviewing old evidence and considering new angles that might have been overlooked in the initial investigation. Maura's family hoped these new perspectives could shed light on overlooked details or reveal previously hidden clues. One of the most promising developments in Maura's case was the use of updated forensic techniques. As DNA analysis and tracking technologies improved, law enforcement began to re-examine any remaining evidence from the site of Maura's car accident. There was talk of using advanced tests to detect traces of other individuals who might have been present near her car that night. These methods were promising, but they also came with challenges. Certain samples had degraded over time, and cold cases often faced resource limitations. Nonetheless, the potential for a breakthrough kept the family and supporters hopeful. Throughout these renewed efforts, online communities continued to play a significant role in keeping Maura's case alive. Social media groups, true crime forums, and even podcasts dedicated episodes to exploring new theories and reanalyzing old evidence. This online activity introduced Maura's story to a younger generation of digital sleuths who were eager to make sense of her last known moments. Theories flourished in these spaces, ranging from the possibility of a tragic accident to more complex scenarios involving unknown parties who may have been on the road that night. For her family, though, the constant circulation of new and old theories was both a blessing and a burden. They appreciated the dedication of the online community, but struggled with the way these theories often became tangled with rumors and speculation. In some cases, family members were even contacted by strangers claiming to have solved the case or found new leads, but most of these claims turned out to be dead ends. It was a painful reminder of how little control they had over Maura's story, even as they tried to keep her memory alive in a respectful and meaningful way. One of the more compelling theories that had emerged in recent years involved the possibility that Maura had met someone along Route 112, someone who could either helped or harmed her. This theory suggested that she might have accepted a ride from a passerby who seemed trustworthy, given her car's condition and the isolated location. Yet, no credible witnesses had come forward to verify this theory, and no one had reported seeing Maura with another person that night. This lack of evidence made the theory difficult to either prove or disprove, leaving it as one of the many unanswered questions in Maura's case. Other theories took a darker turn, suggesting that Maura may have become the victim of a crime of opportunity. The lonely roads and remote wilderness near her last known location were full of places that could conceal evidence, and many speculated that someone could have taken advantage of her vulnerable situation. Her family, however, resisted dwelling on these possibilities, focusing instead on the hope that Maura might still be out there, waiting to be found. As the case reached its 15th anniversary, Maura's story continued to captivate the public. Documentaries, news specials, and in-depth articles revisited her disappearance, piecing together timelines and analyzing each puzzling detail. Her family's unwavering dedication to finding her became a source of inspiration to others dealing with similar losses. They had become advocates not only for Maura but for the countless families of missing persons who were also fighting for answers. For them, Maura's disappearance was a reminder of the strength needed to keep searching, no matter how painful or seemingly endless the journey. In the quiet town of Haverhill, New Hampshire, where Maura had last been seen, her story became part of local history. Some locals avoided the area, while others recounted her story to newcomers, turning Route 112 into a place marked by both sorrow and mystery. The spot where her car had crashed was now a well-known location, and people who passed by couldn't help but wonder what had happened there on that cold February night. Despite years of searching, endless questions, and countless theories, the case of Maura Murray remains unresolved. Her family holds on to hope, no matter how fragile, that one day they might find the answers they've been seeking. And though the world may never know exactly what happened to her on that lonely road, the memory of Maura, her spirit, and her story endure, a testament to the power of hope and the resilience of those who refuse to let her be forgotten. The next and final story is called Gone Without a Trace. On the morning of May 24th, 2019, the quiet suburb of New Canaan, Connecticut, awoke to what seemed like an ordinary day. The town, lined with neat homes and tree-covered streets, was the picture of calm, a place where the days blurred into one another peacefully. Jennifer Doulos, a mother of 5, started her day early. After dropping her children off at school, she planned to head home. But from that moment, everything took a turn that no one saw coming. By midday, friends and family began noticing that something was wrong. Jennifer, who was known for her meticulous nature, hadn't shown up for appointments she had scheduled, nor was she answering calls or texts, a break from her usual pattern of careful communication. The people closest to her tried to brush it off, thinking perhaps she was caught up with the usual busyness of life. But as more time passed, their unease turned to alarm. Later that evening, the sense of worry only intensified. Her friends decided it was time to visit her home on Wells Lane. When they arrived, the house was quiet, the lights off. Inside, there were no immediate signs of anything amiss, but Jennifer was nowhere to be found. It was then that a missing person report was filed with the New Canaan Police Department. Investigators were initially hopeful. After all, Jennifer was a devoted mother, unlikely to simply vanish without a trace. However, this wasn't just a simple case of a parent needing a break. As officers searched the property, they began to piece together unsettling details. The case quickly took on a more ominous tone when police located Jennifer's black Chevrolet Suburban near Waveney Park, an expansive area surrounded by dense woods and trails. Her car was parked in an unassuming lot, as if it had been left in a hurry. But Jennifer herself was gone. Waveney Park was the kind of place where people went to escape, a peaceful retreat, but now it had taken on an eerie atmosphere. Officers combed through the trails and surrounding woods, looking for any trace of Jennifer. They searched meticulously, but nothing pointed to where she might have gone. It was as if she had simply disappeared into thin air. Meanwhile, back in her home, investigators found clues that began to hint at something far darker. Inside the garage, they uncovered evidence that would alter the course of the investigation. A smear of blood, faint yet unmistakable. The presence of blood was not just concerning, it was alarming. Tests would later confirm that the blood was Jennifer's, and it didn't end there. More evidence of a struggle emerged, sending a chill through the officers working the scene. The once tranquil home now held a quiet horror, every room seeming to echo with an unspoken story. It didn't take long for suspicion to turn to Fotis Doulas, Jennifer's estranged husband. Their relationship had been tumultuous for years, marked by a bitter custody battle over their 5 children. Jennifer had spoken to friends about feeling unsafe, and the divorce proceedings had been intense and contentious, casting a shadow over her daily life. Fotis' recent behavior had only added to the tension, and those who knew Jennifer feared that he might be connected to her disappearance. In the days following Jennifer's vanishing, the investigation grew rapidly, spreading from her home in Waveney Park into other areas where Fotis had been seen. Surveillance footage soon became a crucial piece of the puzzle, revealing that Fotis, along with his then-girlfriend, Michelle Troconis, had traveled to multiple locations on the day of Jennifer's disappearance. The footage showed them making stops across town, tossing out bags and items into various dumpsters, each drop raising new questions. As police traced these movements, they found even more disturbing evidence. Items stained with blood, rags, and clothing, all disposed of hastily as if to cover up a tragic scene. Testing confirmed that the blood matched Jennifer's, and the investigation quickly turned toward an inevitable conclusion. This was no longer a search for a missing person, but rather an investigation into a suspected crime. Detectives worked tirelessly, piecing together a timeline of events that pointed toward a carefully concealed act. The blood evidence, the car left near Waveney Park, the disposal of bloody items, all of it hinted at a premeditated plan. But despite the mounting evidence, Jennifer's body remained missing, a fact that haunted the detectives and left her loved ones trapped in a state of agonizing uncertainty. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered the complex web of Jennifer and Fotis' life together, a marriage that had begun with promise and unraveled with startling speed. Friends and family recalled how the two had once seemed the picture of a happy couple, both highly driven and committed to their children. They had moved to Connecticut to build a life in a close-knit community, but beneath the surface, tension was mounting. Over time, their marriage grew strained, largely due to fundamental differences that became impossible to ignore. Jennifer had come from a background of stability, valuing routine and security, especially for their children. Fotis, on the other hand, was known for his intense personality and ambition, a man who pursued success with an almost single-minded focus. He had a thriving business in luxury home construction, and his aspirations were as high as the homes he built. But with each passing year, it became clear that their visions for the future were moving in different directions. Jennifer's writings and conversations with friends hinted at the escalating distress she was feeling, especially as Fotis began making risky financial decisions and forming relationships outside of their marriage. The couple's interactions grew more contentious, and arguments turned increasingly volatile. By the time Jennifer filed for divorce, the relationship had deteriorated to a point where she openly expressed fear for her own safety and that of her children. As detectives reviewed Jennifer's filings in the divorce case, the chilling reality of her words became clear. She had described a man who was controlling, even threatening, and in whose behavior left her in a constant state of unease. Her petition laid out her concerns about Fotis' aggressive tendencies and her wish to protect their children from his influence. She documented moments that painted a portrait of a woman feeling cornered, afraid of what might come next. Her fear, it seemed, was not without reason. With the divorce underway, Fotis' resentment toward Jennifer appeared to intensify. He was determined to maintain custody of their children, refusing to let Jennifer dictate the terms of their lives. The custody battle was fierce, a power struggle that Fotis approached with the same drive he had used in his business. But Jennifer was equally resolute. Her primary concern was her children's safety. She fought to keep them away from what she saw as Fotis' increasingly unpredictable behavior. Meanwhile, Fotis found companionship in Michelle Troconis, a woman who soon became more than just a partner. Their relationship blossomed even as his marriage disintegrated, and with Michelle by his side, Fotis seemed unfazed by the growing animosity between himself and Jennifer. Michelle had been drawn into his life with promises of a new future, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, about the full extent of his marital conflict. The two presented themselves as a united front, seemingly unaffected by the turmoil that was tearing apart Fotis's family. As the legal battle wore on, Fotis's defiance only grew. He was determined to regain control over the life he believed Jennifer had unjustly taken from him. And with each setback in court, his frustration deepened. Despite Jennifer's legal protections, Fotis repeatedly attempted to undermine her position, challenging her every move. In one instance, Jennifer's legal team noted that Fotis had shown up unannounced at her home, an incident that left Jennifer shaken. These intrusions, coupled with his increasingly aggressive stance in court, painted a disturbing picture. A man who viewed Jennifer's choices not as decisions to be respected, but as obstacles to be overpowered. Yet, as intense as the public legal battle was, Jennifer had no idea of the lengths Fotis might go to assert his will. The situation spiraled further when Fotis's financial woes came to light, amplifying the pressure he felt. Burdened by debts and faced with potential business collapse, Fotis saw his world slipping through his fingers. And in that desperation, those closest to Jennifer feared that Fotis might be driven to actions he could never undo. The weeks leading up to Jennifer's disappearance were marked by an atmosphere of unease that lingered in every corner of her life. Jennifer's friends recalled her growing concerns, the feeling that Fotis's unpredictability was becoming more pronounced. She had become more vigilant, altering routines and taking measures to avoid Fotis whenever possible. But no matter how much she tried to distance herself, she could not escape the storm building around her. Detectives pored over these details, realizing that this was not just a simple domestic dispute, it was a ticking time bomb. With the tension between Jennifer and Fotis laid bare, investigators began piecing together a clearer timeline from the day she disappeared. Early leads pointed to Fotis as a prime suspect, but police needed solid evidence to support their suspicions. They turned to Jennifer's home and car, meticulously examining both for any signs that might illuminate what had happened. The investigation soon led to the discovery of security footage that captured Fotis's movements on the day Jennifer vanished. The footage showed him driving around Hartford, Connecticut, in his distinctive pickup truck. But it was not his vehicle alone that caught investigators' attention. It was the numerous stops he made along Albany Avenue, with each location raising new, unsettling questions. At various points, Fotis was seen disposing of items in dumpsters. These images captured him throwing away bags, stopping briefly, and then continuing down the road in what appeared to be a calculated sequence of actions. Detectives retrieved the discarded bags and brought them back for analysis, and what they found inside stunned even the most seasoned investigators. The bags contained pieces of clothing and items, heavily stained with blood. Each item told a story, though incomplete, of a violent scene, and DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Jennifer. The implications were staggering. In one bag, officers found a kitchen sponge, scrubbed almost clean yet still carrying traces of Jennifer's blood, dye. In another, they uncovered paper towels, likewise stained. Together, these items painted a haunting picture of an attempt to erase evidence. Even with these findings, the biggest mystery remained unsolved: Jennifer herself. Every item, every stain pointed to a tragic event, but her body was nowhere to be found. Detectives were left piecing together fragments of that day's events, trying to reconstruct a story from the details Fotis had attempted to discard. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the scope of what had happened, but without Jennifer, the full truth remained elusive. The focus shifted back to Fotis and his girlfriend, Michelle Troconis. From the start, Michelle had been a figure of interest, her close relationship with Fotis suggesting that she might know more than she was initially willing to admit. During questioning, Michelle was noticeably tense. When detectives pressed her about Fotis's actions, she initially claimed ignorance, saying she knew nothing about Jennifer's disappearance. However, as investigators presented her with evidence from the bags, Michelle's story began to shift. Under pressure, Michelle made several admissions that seemed to implicate Fotis. She admitted to helping him clean spills in his car, though she claimed she didn't ask questions about what those stains were or how they'd gotten there. She described Fotis as nervous in the days after Jennifer disappeared, mentioning that he had asked her to accompany him to Hartford for a drive. When she hesitated, Fotis reassured her, saying he simply needed to get rid of some things. But what Michelle didn't know was that her cooperation, however reluctant, was leading detectives to build an even stronger case. They noted her inconsistencies, contrasting her original denial with her later admissions, and began to see that her knowledge might be deeper than she wanted to reveal. With each interview, Michelle's involvement became harder to overlook. As police continued their investigation, they also examined Fotis's phone records, GPS data, and digital footprints, which painted an increasingly damning picture. His phone activity suggested that he had been active in the area around Jennifer's home around the time she disappeared. Text messages and call logs indicated a flurry of activity between him and Michelle, hinting at coordination that couldn't be dismissed as mere coincidence. Detectives expanded their search to Fotis's property in Farmington, Connecticut, the sprawling estate where he lived. This home, once a symbol of his success, became the setting for forensic teams scouring every inch for clues. They examined the grounds, looking for any sign of disturbed earth or recently covered tracks. However, they faced an obstacle. Despite their best efforts, they found no immediate trace of Jennifer on the property. Fotis's behavior, meanwhile, continued to raise suspicions. He made several public statements declaring his innocence and framing himself as a victim of what he called a biased investigation. His words were measured, almost rehearsed, as he insisted that he had no part in Jennifer's disappearance. Yet, to detectives who had seen the damning evidence in the dumpsters, his statements rang hollow. The case, by now, had gained widespread media attention. Every new detail, every lead was covered extensively, and the pressure on the investigation only grew. Family members, friends, and even strangers awaited news of Jennifer's whereabouts, hoping for answers that seemed agonizingly out of reach. Back in the lab, forensic analysts continued testing every item recovered from the bags, analyzing each scrap of fabric, each fiber, for additional evidence. They ran advanced tests to identify substances invisible to the naked eye, hoping to uncover new leads. Though much of the evidence pointed to a tragic ending, detectives held on to the possibility that something overlooked might finally bring them the answers they sought. As days turned to weeks, the hunt for Jennifer remained as determined as ever. As investigators tightened their case against Fotis Doulos, the story of Jennifer's disappearance gripped the nation. Media outlets picked up every new detail, and as the days passed, Fotis's name became synonymous with the ongoing search for answers. The pressure was relentless, both in the public eye and within the legal system. And in a courtroom packed with reporters and curious onlookers, the case took on a new level of intensity. Fotis, defiant as ever, hired a high-profile defense attorney to help craft his public image. His legal team argued that the police had mishandled the investigation, claiming that evidence was circumstantial and that Fotis was being unfairly targeted. Their strategy was simple but calculated: create enough doubt to undermine the state's case. They insisted that the items in the dumpsters, while troubling, did not directly connect Fotis to any crime. Yet, for investigators, each argument felt hollow in the face of the evidence they'd gathered. Michelle Troconis was also drawn into the legal battle. Facing mounting pressure and the possibility of significant charges, she wavered in her stance, torn between loyalty to Fotis and the overwhelming fear of what lay ahead. Detectives knew that if they could get Michelle to cooperate, they might unlock the final pieces of the puzzle. In interviews, she appeared shaken, her once defiant demeanor giving way to doubt. Her attorney began negotiating with prosecutors, hinting that she might reveal additional details in exchange for leniency. Yet, even as she shared more about the night Jennifer went missing, she stopped short of a full confession, holding back crucial details that could definitively implicate Fotis. Public fascination with the case continued to grow, and so did the scrutiny on everyone involved. Jennifer's friends and family maintained a strong presence, giving statements to the media that emphasized her love for her children and the life she had hoped to build away from Fotis. They painted a picture of a devoted mother whose only goal had been to provide a safe and stable environment for her kids, a woman who had tried to leave a troubled past behind. With each interview, the weight of Jennifer's absence was felt, and the resolve to find the truth only deepened. Meanwhile, Fotis's legal team turned to the media to counter these portrayals. They presented Fotis as a devoted father, unfairly caught in a storm of suspicion, a man victimized by the court of public opinion. His attorney held press conferences, framing Fotis as the underdog fighting a biased system, biased system. But as his denials grew more forceful, the public suspicion only seemed to harden. Many found it hard to reconcile Fotis's carefully constructed image with the actions he had taken in the days following Jennifer's disappearance. The case intensified with each hearing, with both sides fiercely defending their positions. The prosecution presented evidence linking Fotis to the blood-stained items and questioned Michelle's role in the events, challenging her to come forward with the whole truth. Michelle's wavering loyalty became a key focus, and the prosecution made it clear that they viewed her as a potential accomplice. Her statements were inconsistent, but she had revealed enough for prosecutors to suggest that she was indeed part of something far more orchestrated than a mere misunderstanding. As the trial dates approached, Fotis and his defense team prepared for what would be the most significant battle yet. They filed motions, challenging the admissibility of evidence, while prosecutors pushed back, determined to use every shred of information they had gathered. They knew that without Jennifer's body, the case was challenging, but they were resolute. To them, the blood evidence, the surveillance footage, and Michelle's shifting story formed a compelling narrative that could not be ignored. Throughout the process, Jennifer's family remained a constant presence. They attended every hearing, their expressions somber but resolute. For them, this was not just a legal battle. It was a fight for justice for Jennifer, a mother and daughter whose absence left an unfillable void. Their quiet strength contrasted sharply with the public spectacle that surrounded Fotis, a man whose every statement seemed designed to deflect blame. The legal proceedings became a spectacle, covered extensively by the press, with every detail dissected in the news. The pressure on Fotis grew, yet he appeared determined to cling to his version of events. For detectives and prosecutors, it was a race against time to present a case compelling enough to ensure that justice would prevail, even in the absence of final, conclusive answers. As the legal process continued, investigators and Jennifer's family wrestled with the painful reality that a resolution might never come. Even with the mounting evidence, one haunting truth remained: Jennifer's body had not been found. This absence was like a wound that refused to heal, leaving both law enforcement and Jennifer's loved ones with questions that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. Behind the scenes, detectives continued to revisit old evidence and search new areas. They combed through abandoned properties, remote parks, and dense woods, hoping that a new clue might emerge. The scale of the search was immense, and it took a toll on everyone involved. Officers who had once felt a hopeful urgency found themselves weighted down by the sheer length and complexity of the investigation, their resolve tested as they came up empty time and again. Jennifer's family, meanwhile, struggled with the void her disappearance left in their lives. Her mother, Gloria Farber, became the primary caretaker for Jennifer's children, stepping into the role Jennifer had so lovingly filled. For the children, life had irrevocably changed, their once secure world upended by a tragedy they were too young to fully comprehend. Gloria did her best to shield them from the storm surrounding their mother's disappearance, but as the investigation dragged on, shielding them grew harder. She held on to hope, clinging to the belief that justice would be served, even as the days without Jennifer grew longer. For Fotis, the strain of maintaining his innocence took a toll as well. Public scrutiny had changed the course of his life, and his actions were now watched more closely than ever. Every movement, every appearance, and every statement he made was dissected by a public increasingly convinced of his involvement. Despite his denials, his once confident demeanor began to waver under the weight of the investigation and the court battles he could no longer escape. Meanwhile, Michelle Troconis remained caught in the middle. Her initial loyalty to Fotis had faded as the reality of the situation set in, and her legal team advised her to cooperate fully. But even as she offered new details, her answers remained incomplete, leaving prosecutors to wonder how much of her story was true and how much was an attempt to lessen her own involvement. The ambiguity of her statements only deepened the sense of mystery, and as she walked the line between witness and suspect, the public watched, waiting to see if she would reveal the whole truth. The investigation's toll extended beyond the legal team and Jennifer's family. The community itself felt the strain. The small town of New Canaan, once known for its quiet streets and close-knit neighborhoods, had become the center of a national story. The once familiar streets felt different, the memory of Jennifer's disappearance casting a shadow over the town. People who had never known her found themselves grieving the loss of a mother and friend they'd only come to know through the headlines. As the years passed, Jennifer's case moved closer to becoming a cold case. Leads dwindled, and the initial fervor surrounding the investigation quieted, though her family never stopped hoping for a resolution. Detectives moved on to new cases, though Jennifer's file remained on their desks as a reminder of the work left unfinished. The weight of unresolved questions lingered, and the absence of final answers became a lasting reminder of a case that had shaped and scarred the lives of all who had touched it. But hope remained a quiet presence, and Jennifer's loved ones continued to hold on to the belief that someday the answers they sought might finally come. For now, they waited, honoring Jennifer's memory in silence, knowing that the search for truth was far from over. If you found these stories as fascinating and chilling as we did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Chill Thrills Stories Ying. Make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss one of our daily uploads. We'd love to hear your thoughts, theories, or anything we might have missed about today's stories, so drop a comment below. Thank you for watching Chill Thrills Story In, and as always, stay curious, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one. The next story is called Maura Murray. The next and final story is called Gone Without a Trace.